You're watching LTV, Comcast 34 and FIOS 26, Livingston.
Good day, Livingston, and welcome to Clergy Corner. Did you know that the internet is killing religion? Well, according to Alan Donnie, he thinks so. He did some research at his college where he is an associate professor, the Olin College, where this research indicates that about 10 years ago, the affluentness of religion and the affiliatedness of religion started to slip. And at the same time, that's when the computer age started to becoming mainstay for a lot of our homes. This is what we're going to talk about today on Clergy Corner. Well, joining me today on the panel, we have Monsignor Tom Beidinger from St. Philomena's Roman Catholic Church. We have Reverend Susan Gillespie from Trinity Covenant Church, and we have Richard Vossler, Reverend Dr. Richard Vossler from Grace Lutheran Church. Welcome.
Thank you, Dan.
My question that I have, Tom, I'm going to direct this question to you, is we've heard what John Downey says, and there was an article a couple of weeks ago about is the internet killing religion. What do you think?
Well, I mean, I have not seen great details of his study. I've not seen that full article. I have read some materials on it. And I think certainly I can't speak from the perspective of having all the information before me that he may have presented. So my speaking is limited. But I mean, basically, it seems the point that he's making is that as the internet usage has increased, so has the affiliation decreased in a similar fashion. And it seems to me that based on that information, it seems to be a weak, if any, correlation between the two. I mean, just because one goes up and the other goes down does not necessarily mean one is the cause or even the correlation for it.
Right.
I didn't see any statistical studies. I didn't see any statistical citations that connected, that lead him to believe, I think it was that he said 25% of it can be attributed to internet use. But there are so many other factors that I wonder if they brought them into play because of the population that uses the internet more frequently has many other characteristics that might account together for a decreased affiliation.
I know that on the some of the research that I did prior to the show, it was talking about where this one professor did a study where a lot of the homogeneous people will go ahead and they have their doubts and they can express them on the internet, and it's worldwide. And so they have more of a following, they have more of a semblance of expressing what their feelings are, and they find out that other people have doubts or maybe they have other questions, and that gives them that more uplifting and more nurturing, so that they buddy up with that. So that was one of them. But I agree with you, Tom. I think that in a sense, maybe this article is weak because there are so many variables that have now been considered for the affiliated and the unaffiliated, and I think those terms are quite interesting. You know,
and I don't want to suggest that his research is flawed or his research is weak,
right?
Because I haven't seen all of it, and that's my point. But I mean, it just seems to me, just based on what I have seen, I'm not casting any aspersions on his research or the validity of it. Yeah. But the conclusions are, unless I were able to see more of it, I don't know if you guys would feel the same way. But
yeah,
read popular articles, but I have a desire to define the terms.
Yeah,
you
please.
know, so we in what you're talking about, if people are doing the kind of conversation you're talking about, then it doesn't seem that the internet is killing faith. It may, however, be changing the institutions.
I think
and
that's it.
Our
Yeah.
allegiance to institutions. And I think that certainly anecdotally, we see that both, in some ways, it can strengthen them. I mean, certainly everybody in my church uses the internet, and we use email to talk to each other and on that kind of thing. On the other hand, those who are making connections in a different way, in cyberspace, so to speak, they're still making connections. So it's much like the printing press. It changes who has authority, who has sovereignty, who gets to make choices, but that doesn't mean that anything bad is happening to faith. It just means the institutions need to change.
Yeah, and I think that's really a good, good definition there, because what's the difference between faith and the attendance in church or attendance in synagogue is that, according to this study, is that the internet, and he is proponing this and supporting this idea that when the internet started to become popular, then the affiliation with religious institutions started to decline. But I think we're talking about faith too. Rick, what do you think?
Well, to get to what you'd said, that it was only like 20 or 25% was attributed to the internet. I mean, at least 75, 80% not attributed to it. In his article, he had figured out where 50% of it came from, but not the other 50%, so there's still a lot more.
Yeah.
But in that, he did say, though, that he had factored in different things to go through, but still it gives a question. The internet really is, it's a tool. And the question is, how do you use the tool? I think what you brought up, Sue, about the printing press. Certainly at that time they may have had a similar discussion about that. Is the printing press good or is it not good? In our tradition, we have Martin Luther, who challenged the Roman Catholic Church at that time.
That's why we had you guys separate.
Oh,
That's why, otherwise we'd be fighting.
I'm in the middle.
I knew you'd bring that up.
Well, what I'm saying is that Martin Luther, that's why I said at that time he challenged the Roman Catholic Church, but his writings, because of the printing press, were scattered throughout the area, throughout that world. 100 years before, there was a fellow named Jan Hus who had similar writings, had similar beliefs, but there was no printing press. His message did not get out in the same way that Luther's did. So it becomes a tool, and the question becomes, how does the church use that? And having said, there certainly are instances where the technology is, I don't want to say harming the church, but it's harming relationships. People are more apt to make relationships over the internet. As you were saying, they're able to vent or able to, and they're concentrating on that so much that they don't know how to make a face-to-face relationship. And how does that,
and the research indicates that it's not only the religious institutions that are being suffered by the internet, but it's also the other institutions, the other organizations are suffering because of the internet.
That's because the internet ruins authority. Everybody's an authority now. You see the frustration of scientific bodies releasing the results of research and having other people say, I discount that. And somehow they're just as much an authority just because they said that. And you can organize yourself around the people who say what you think and ignore other authorities. So authority has become pretty scattered and discrete, and it's very hard for anybody to just assert authority. You have to almost earn it, and maybe some of the ways in which people earn it don't have so much to do with why they should be an authority. It's an interesting thing.
Yeah.
But I think one of the other issues to introduce into the conversation too is the fact that is not so much how the people or the society uses the internet, but how the religious institutions use the internet. And I think, like for example, I will speak on behalf of the Roman Catholic tradition. I don't want to speak about the other denominations, but we've often lagged behind our use of the internet to try to promote, evangelize, and try to get the word out.
Right.
One of the things, if you've ever done internet research, you can really determine immediately what institutions, religious or otherwise, put a great deal of effort and resources into their websites or their internet sites, and really keep them updated, keep them interactive and informative. And sometimes we as a Roman Catholic Church sometimes lag behind that, and we have to maybe use it more wisely, use it in a way that's going to attract, and use it in a way that's going to be a tool, as Rick said, for evangelization, for that promoting our religious institutions.
Yeah, and it's eliciting conversation and dialogue with people, and that's something that the internet and technology has really helped us out, because it's not only in the community, it's the global community. You can talk about different types of theological or faith issues with someone that lives in Zimbabwe, for instance, or in Switzerland, than you live here in Livingston. So it's really broadened that whole scope.
So then really the churches that are using technology and the like, the goal then is to help connect the folks that they are talking to globally, online, connect them locally, collect them to a local congregation, a local house of worship. It was interesting, during Lent, one of the pastors in our denomination, who is active on Facebook, said that for Facebook, during Lent, he was going to give up Facebook. Another person spoke to him and said, no, don't do that, because you have such a following. You may be the only connection that these people have to a church. So in that respect, continue. I mean, maybe not tell, for lunch I had this or something, knock that stuff out, but still keep your connections.
How we use it.
And it's how you use it that makes the important.
Twitter when you're going to eat lunch is not so important, but maybe if you're having a program or you're doing something at the church to talk it up and to raise awareness about it, then that's another thing.
Well, the nice thing about Twitter is it's democratizing. If you can't afford a real expensive website, you can say things on Twitter at the same rate as anybody else.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah.
So we could do Clergy Corner Twitter and get different types of
You'd have to keep it to
questions.
140 characters, though, Dan.
Oh, I don't know if I can do that. That would be really, really tough. I would try, though. For the good of the show, I would try. But it's about connection. I'm hearing this, and this is something that's coming up in my mind, is connecting. And the internet is helping people to connect. They might not be, and it's with other variables, affiliated with the church. And I think it's interesting that they're coming up with the terms affiliated, unaffiliated, but I think people want to connect. And they're connecting to many different people through the internet. Where I see the difficulty is it's the face-to-face connection. And they're not getting that face-to-face connection. And I think that's something that the houses of worship and the communities of faith have over a lot of the other internet capabilities, is that we draw people in through our internet and our technology. Have you noticed or found that to be true? Sue, you do a lot of internet and technology at the church you serve. Have you seen a lot of people coming because of the technology?
I think it just strengthens our connections. I don't know that I've met anyone online who then came to our church, but certainly people who have met, at church or elsewhere, that I maintain a connection with through the internet. We get a stronger friendship, and the connection stays. Look, I've had certainly long pastoral counseling sessions on Facebook message that we never would have had time for, and given that person's work life or whatever, if you had to come to the office. I'm not saying there was no place to ever come to the office, but I liked having that option. So I think it just becomes a bigger, wider tool.
I think where Downing is falling short is he's doing the statistical status with the attendance probably, and how many people are going or not going. But I think where it falls short is he's not counting the contact, the conversations that people are having around faith.
To me, the larger concern comes back to that question of authority, though, because I'm not saying that only people who have seminary degrees can say what the Bible says or whatever, But it is true that you need to have some training, some discipleship, in order to know how to use the Bible or whatever. And to the sense that the internet is democratizing, you can get a lot of people gathered around a certain interpretation which really isn't very valid and may even be harmful, but there isn't anyone there to say, that's a dangerous path. So it is democratizing, but authority, how you establish authority is difficult to figure out in this new realm we're in.
And that kind of places a burden on the person who is using the internet, because when you're talking one-on-one with someone, you tend to know who they are. I know who you are and where you're from and what you're doing. But on the internet, as soon as someone sees something in writing, all of a sudden it's gospel truth.
Yeah, it's all automatic
Anyone can
authority
say
right
it.
there. Yeah.
So you really got to be conscious of, well, who's writing it? What's their qualifications to be writing it? Do they, what's their motivation for writing it? And not just, but we don't tend to go through those steps sometimes when we're on. So anyone from anywhere can say something and sound authoritative, and not be scrutinized or not be. But so that does put a burden on us, meaning on anybody who is using the internet, to make sure that what you're looking at is legitimate, is authentic, is worthy of our allegiance or whatever the word would be.
Yeah, and that also brings up the fact that when you're talking face to face, you have time to you may have time to think about it, but you're bouncing off on facial features. There's feedback. When you're writing a letter or something like that, you have time to think it through and to correct or to change. The problem with email, with Twitter, with Facebook, et cetera, something like that is it's faceless in that there's nothing there to bounce back, and you can type really quick, hit send, and boom, it's not just to that one person, but it's completely throughout cyberspace.
And it's never going away.
never, no, not ever. Yeah.
And the other thing that we can tend to do, or at least I tend to do, I don't want to say we, I know I tend to do, is if I'm communicating via email or some other form, when I'm actually doing typing and I'm actually using writing like a letter, I mean, you're always going to write a letter different than you're going to talk to somebody.
Yes.
But when I'm using the internet, sometimes I think I'm talking, and I'm talking in my head and typing it, and more often than once I've gotten misinterpreted, that I was saying something that I wasn't saying, because maybe I was being funny, maybe I was being sarcastic, maybe I was being facetious or whatever, and that would come out in a conversation, but it wouldn't necessarily come out in print.
Not in print.
Right, and it's those cap letters.
Yeah. And yes,
And how locked in we are to technology. We were discussing here on the show before the show began, is that last night I spilled coffee on my computer, which we don't have the teleprompter, we don't have some of the manuscripts that we would normally have, and I'm going, how locked into technology we are, and how handicapped we are without that. But it's nice to kind of be off the cuff at times, because it's a lot more maybe genuine, and where I think we've gotten into our society where we're so locked in. We need technology. What would happen if the electricity went out?
Yeah. But there's something else we need to mention, which is that all of us here are immigrants to the technology world, and the younger generations are natives to it. And so we will always speak technology with an accent, and they use technology without even having to think. It's not original. They
Good though.
They use it without thinking about it, and are able to use it more natively than we do. So we need to be able to admit that when we're having this conversation, because there are ways in which we actually don't know how it is used.
Oh, okay, so maybe when the topic is technology killing religion, is maybe that is something that we're warming up to, saying no, and the younger generation is saying no. It aids to religion, it aids to organizations, because we can get the word out faster.
Yeah.
And in different ways. It's not verbosable. It's not the wordiness. It's very succinct and a very concise message.
Right, but what not religion, but what organization, so to speak, is it that they're focusing on? Are they focusing it on the organized churches, or are they focusing on their own faith, so to speak? Do they see, as you say, we're immigrant to a lot of the technology, and do they see that as a great divide, and they stay in their side, on their side of it, and we're trying to get into that side, but it's up to them to decide, how close are we coming to that?
I think everybody's scrambling around trying to answer the question, why is attendance or why is the affiliated with any community of faith, why is that on the decline?
Yeah.
And so we're trying to answer it, well, maybe it's the internet, maybe it's technology, maybe it's not the people connecting with one another, maybe it's stuffy sermons, maybe it's a stuffy, faith community, maybe it's not relevant to a person's needs and wants and desires.
Yeah.
And they're talking about the isms, about the younger generation, and it's the younger generation that are saying it's the gay rights, it's the judgmentalness, it's the non-accepting. They're lumping all of this in here, and I have parishioners that are, it's almost anxiousness. They see what's going on in the society, and they're thinking, oh my gosh, the unaffiliated is gathering steam, and there's a lot more unaffiliated than there are affiliated. How do we, as pastors, as clergy, minister to that question and try to help our congregants move from what it used to be in maybe the 1950s or 60s to what we have today? Rick, have you thought about that?
Moving it to the
It's
not really. It's trying to reach out to them. I'm not really sure.
I think in terms of, if I can just jump in,
Yeah.
I think we've got to, as institutions and as religious institutions, we've got to completely rethink the way we do what we do.
Yeah.
I think the way we've done things and the way they've always been done just don't work in today's world as well as they did in 1950, 1930, 1940. They just don't. And so we've got to use things like technology and internet and other things, other realities of doing things, and maybe look at what some more secular institutions have done to increase their following. And I know in a Catholic church we have this new book. I forget the author. It's called Rebuilt. And it completely revamps it sort of breaks down the structure that has sort of been in place for us as a Catholic church and says, this is where we've got to go. When I read the book, I'll come back and tell you what it was all about. But then there's another program called Intentional Discipleship. It's a program called Intentional Discipleship, and it's encouraging us to be intentional disciples, because the way the world is going with affiliation and affiliation falling, we have to make it much more intentional. And what that means, when I read that, I'll let you know.
It's interesting you're saying, talk about technology and the like. It relates almost to in worship. What type of worship, is it you have a traditional worship, or do you have a more contemporary worship? And a lot of congregations saying, we need to get it to a more contemporary worship. And they've done a study that said that, what kind of worship do, quote, millennials want? Yeah. Do they want traditional? Do they want contemporary? Of course they want contemporary. No. They want quality. Whether it's traditional, whether it's contemporary, they want quality. They want meaning. They want substance. And I think the same could go technology in general. I think you can say the same thing. Whether it's more traditional, whether it's more contemporary. I mean, it's important to have the technology, but let's make it quality.
I think we have to decide that our job really isn't the maintaining of our institutions. We really work for God. God is not going away. God's not afraid of technology. I keep thinking we could have renamed this a couple thousand years ago, Is Jesus Killing Religion? Because the religious authorities are quite nervous about him and his methods and his ways and his reach. So I think we have to at some point lay down our own affiliation, and give it to the Lord and say, if this institution or whatever we call it is something that you want to go forward, show us how to do it. Otherwise, if we need to do it an entirely different way, let's do that. I mean, we don't serve the institution, we serve the Lord. So.
Yeah, it goes on the whole thing. I mean, did Gutenberg kill religion?
Right.
You know, all of a sudden, that television, oh my goodness, now people are saying television instead of they're coming to church, or movies instead, you know.
Yeah. We can't provide a good enough spectacle, but that's not the point. Yeah.
Yeah, it's doing what we do well, and it's building community and having the community connect with one another.
Right.
And we can use technology for that. So instead of technology killing religion, technology is really aiding to religion and the voice of religion, and using it as a voice for the voiceless.
The one of the when Sue was talking, I was thinking about her question about how do we view our institutions, and how do we define our institutions? What are our institutions? This big, huge thing, and I know coming from the Catholic Church, where we do have that big tradition, you know, and that big thing. But or can we view our own religious institutions as the way that we have culturally expressed ourselves, you know, and then drive it toward faith, faith in Jesus Christ, faith in and however that, you know, in your expression, my expression, you know, and so maybe we sort of tone that down a little bit, because this is the tradition I'm comfortable in living out my faith, and so I would communicate it in that way.
Yeah, you know, and I'm kind of wondering if we're afraid of the new inventions. We were afraid of the Gutenberg press. We were afraid of the television.
Consistently, we're afraid of everything.
Putting, you know, televising, or putting the, you know, the worship services on, you know, radio, and because that was going to keep people away. It seemed like we're always lagging behind. I don't think the Roman Catholic Church is the only church that you mentioned, but I think all of us could say that we're lagging behind on technology, so we're going to say it's killing. We're afraid of it. Anything that is different, it has to be taken away, instead of saying, we got to go ahead
and because we're not
live.
native users, we tend to lag behind.
Yeah.
You know? Because the people who are in leadership now in the churches are the immigrants.
Right.
And part of the technology is not just the internet, but part of the technology is marketing.
Yeah, sure.
Marketing the church, marketing the worship centers, you know, the synagogues, you know, the temples. You got to be kidding me. Why do we have to market God? But that's part of it. Marketing the community of faith that we find comfortable for ourselves. If we find it comfortable for ourselves, we want to share the news.
Well, it's how you speak in this culture. It's how you have a voice in this culture in many ways.
And how you call it. I mean, you call it marketing in the church. You call it evangelism. And even at that, you know, members of the congregation are like, the E word, evangelism. But that's what it is. It's how do you bring the good news of Jesus into the community? And as you're saying, it's, you know, the institution, or is, you know, are we here to preserve the institution or to further the kingdom?
Well, then should we be alarmed by the increasing numbers of the unaffiliated?
I think we should be paying attention, but I don't think anything that comes from fear can also be coming from faith. So we got to pick one or the other, you know, fear or faith there.
I think the question would be the unaffiliated, but what is it that they believe? I mean, is it some generic God, or is it something, you know, talking about faith in Jesus? Or is it, you know, that's where, you know, what does Scripture say, and how do they accept that?
And maybe that's where technology will help us out, is to start that discussion.
Sure.
Well, thank you so much for being on the show today, and thank you for your time, and thank you for watching at home. If you have any questions or comments, please email them to livingstonclergy.org. Until we meet again, may God's love be with you.